Right, so this morning's message then is God's hand and how God keeps his word. And it comes from that reading, Luke chapter 1, verse 57 to 66. I've tried to start with some jokes, and actually some folk have started to smile and enjoy them. So I'm going to try a few this morning. Some people think I'm opinionated, but I think vampires suck, don't you? I also think Russian dolls are so full of themselves. Oh, we're getting woke up. Now, you may not believe this, but I had a very strange addiction. I was addicted to the hokey cokey. Who knows what that was all about? I was asked what the difference this week was between ignorance and apathy. And my answer was simple. Personally, I don't know and I don't care. Right. So that it is. That's us. You've got the smiles on. We're going to get a bit of cake. We'll smile later on. Let's smile as we see what God's got to feed us on in this passage. It's kind of a follow on from last week, but let me just give folks a wee recap of what we've been doing during this Advent adventure, this journey that we're taking together. We've been in the waiting period. That's what Advent is. They're waiting for something big to happen. And the something big is about the most important guest that we can ever meet, that the young folks were telling us about in the Nativity. We started really looking at prophets about 700 years ago and 400 years ago. And actually, we pointed our way back to Samuel, the book of Samuel in the Bible, where King David was anointed. And it was there that of David's line, this special guest was going to be born. So this has been planned for a long time. And so last week, we fast forwarded in a time machine, and we were roughly about a year before this special guest. Two old folks, how do you say that nicely? Two old codgers that were well past the age of having kids were given a promise that made Zechariah so surprised that he couldn't speak for a year. They were told they were going to have a child. And instead of the tradition then was to call the baby after the father, baby Zechariah. They were told by an angel that you've to name the baby John. And we know that that guy was John the Baptist when he grew up. So God has used the prophets and kings, and now he's using angels as well. And isn't that wonderful that God can use so many different things? He can even use us to tell people the great news and to bring blessings to others. Now, this week, it said about a year ago when they were promised this child, were 3 months before the time of this special guest Jesus arrives. And that's the time that this baby John the Baptist is born. And he's actually Jesus' cousin. I don't know if you've got any cousins that are quite close in age to you or that you go on well with, but these two got on well as they grew up. As well as being Jesus' cousin, he was also a very special man, and we learned about some of the special blessings that would be upon him as his part in the big story of history, God's story, his story that is about to unfold. And many people who have ever had a baby, it's two things. Firstly, it's usually quite scary. And the other thing is usually it's something quite amazing and astounding. And, this wee living creature arrives about 8 or 9 months after you first begin to discover that you're going to have a child. And I don't know anybody ever feels ready when the baby arrives. You always feel unprepared. And for those who are delighted by this news, the whole growing up stage, the whole growing stage of those 8 or 9 months is quite a lovely and special experience. You get to tell others that you're expecting this child. Sometimes you don't even know if it's going to be a boy or a girl. And everybody, your family and your friends usually are very, very pleased for you. But the last few days, and the ladies can confirm this, I'm sure, that have had a child, the last few days are a bit uncomfortable. Would that be true, to say the least? And then the last few moments before it arrives, they're a lot uncomfortable. I'll tell you, it's really uncomfortable for the man as well when the woman's crushing their fingers. Joking aside, it's quite scary to see your loved one in such pain at a time when there's going to be such joy. And the good news is when that wee baby arrives and goes into her arms, that she seems to forget about the pain. I don't know that all the pain's gone away, but it certainly eases away. And I believe there's a hormone called relaxin, which helps to take that away. So these are special times. Things begin to happen. Those last few moments, you fly off to hospital, and suddenly a new family member arrives into the world, a boy or a girl. And after all this scary ordeal, often the screams from other rooms as well, the child is there. The big tough men start to cry when that happens. I know it brought a tear to my eyes 4 different times. And women, they just want to see that the child's all right. They want to check all the wee fingers are there, and they want to cuddle it and nurture it and love it. It's really quite an experience. Mothers want to give it comfort and love. And actually, fathers don't know whether to comfort and love the baby or the wife. It's just such a special time. One thing that always stood out to me in each of the 4 occasions we had kids was that there was a feature or 2 that were clearly the mum's ear was slightly a different shape on one side, and this baby had that, or it had a feature like me, unfortunately for that child. But they had features from mum and from dad. But each child had features that were unique. Now they might have came from ancestors and genetically, but they seemed to me to have something unique that God had put in them that made them different and special. And I'm not just talking about their fingerprints and the number of hairs in their head and so on. Each child seemed to be this combination. Now, both parents played their part, but I believe as a Christian that God plays a part in everything that's created and in each one of you too. And I'm so humbled by the different facets of the good ones, at least, that some of my parents and things passed on. But I'm also so humbled that this God is so amazing that he makes us all unique and special and important to him. And he's like that mother that just wants to bring comfort and love and blessing into our lives. And so last week we were thinking of Zechariah and Elizabeth, and we were thinking about how they'd been promised this baby, John the Baptist. Now, can you imagine the excitement and the scariness for them? They were well on in the years, and here they didn't have the modern hospitals and things that we've got. And I must admit that that's one of the things that you really appreciate at that time, is that there are experts to make sure that it all goes well. This child, when it was born, was to be named John, because that's what the angel had told Zechariah, and Zechariah had somehow related that to his wife. And this week's passage talks about the reaction as this baby John is born. All their friends and neighbours, our verses tell us, rejoiced with them. And the neighbours' thoughts were about how kind God was and has been to them. Isn't that lovely? And I know it's like that in the church. When somebody is a child, the whole church is delighted for that family. And we just heard this morning about somebody who's got twin grandchildren that came in August, and they were so excited. They wanted to show me the photograph, and get a look at that photograph later. It is the cutest thing ever. That's this lovely couple here. Peter and Sarah. I was just trying to remember your sister's name, which Fiona, Jukes' brother and wife. Sorry, I'm rubbish with names at times, but get a look at those twins. They are so lovely. Now, in the 8th day, it was the custom, the tradition back then, to name the child, and they did exactly as they were instructed by God through the angel. And by that time, they named the baby John. Suddenly, Zechariah could speak again. And not just was he speaking, he was dancing for joy and he was praising God. And it is a most wonderful thing to have any kind of blessing from God, but you can just imagine what the excitement was like for him. And I pray that for each one of us, we'll all have times like this where our gratitude, where we are so humbled by the kindness of our God that we just can't help ourselves, that we end up dancing about and giving thanks and praising Him with exuberance and joy. Please have those times in the days that lie ahead. Don't think you're past it. Zechariah and Elizabeth probably thought that their days of these things were over, and yet God still comes and surprises people and gives gifts that they didn't expect. The wonder of this, we're told in the passage, spread throughout the whole area, the Judean hill area, and everyone who heard about it reflected on these events and asked, I wonder what this child will turn out to be. For, did you notice those words? For the hand of the Lord is surely upon him in a special way. Isn't that lovely? Now, we knew that was what was foretold by the angel, but these folks somehow know it when they see this child, and that's spectacular. And this is just this is a big thing, but it's a tiny thing in the big story of God's wider plans that teach us about how we should be faithful. Well, we're told about the character of Zechariah and Elizabeth last week. They always tried to live to please God. And they were obedient to Him and enjoyed this, probably one of the most biggest blessings ever. And they fought against the naming cultural trends and traditions of their day. And that's often not easy to kind of go against the tide. Their friends and relatives were kind of pushing them one way, and they stood their ground. And sometimes we get kind of pushed by all kinds of peer pressures or cultural pressures, family pressures. I know what these things can be like. I've got a very big family, and friends can often presume that we're going to do one thing, but God might want us to do another. And the challenge for us is if we're able to listen to God and to obey Him, that's always best. And we should strive to please God and to obey His word at all times. Now, perhaps you're thinking that just me, the ordinary person that I am sitting in the congregation today, maybe I won't have such an enormous part to play in God's bigger picture. Well, it's okay for us to think that, but we should again never presume. We can never know what God has for us if we serve Him faithfully, if we're obedient, if we learn wisely to live the way that He would like us to walk in His will, under His comfort and care. We cannot change the past, but what lies ahead is the future that God has mapped out for us if we can follow His lead along the path. And inviting God's hand upon us in a great way is what living to please Him brings to our lives. Keeping His word, being a witness, so much so that when we are blessed, it seems to go out there into the community. The fragrance of God's blessing on us as individuals and as a church should go out into the world that we mingle into. So let that be the message of today. Young folk, you've got a lot to give. The middle-aged folk, you've got a lot to give. And the folks who are all the wisdom of age, you've still got a lot to add in the years that lie ahead. May you be blessed, so much so that we just want to dance and share in your joy and blessing. And we want to also gossip how good our God is wherever we go. Amen.